Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rachel Hanna, and I'll be joined by DRC Hutchings and Eddie Ju. And we are going to share with you a little of our story about our OER journey. Hopefully people can see now this presentation screen. And let me make sure I'm over the right screen. There we go. So we want to start off our work with you in understanding why you chose this session. So if you would take a moment and using Slido, come in and write your questions that you may have, or excuse me, why you chose this session. So if you would take a moment, if you have any questions, that you also want to uplift, you can do that here, but why did you choose this session is what we're first asking. And you can join us at slido.com, and the number is 6092267. And I'm watching the chat too, because there's all sorts of wonderful locations everybody's joining us from. We are up in Anchorage, Alaska. So we're a little bit more northern climb than some of you, but it's really interesting to see you all. And I'm curious if anybody's having challenges getting into the Slido. I see a few people are typing. So I'm going to let and keep that open. And as we move forward, it looks like we've got interested in the undergraduate research connection and wanting to learn more about OER. And so feel free to keep typing in that space as we move forward into our presentation. Thank you. I want to take a quick moment to center ourselves. We have 4 learning outcomes that we're looking to accomplish. We want to recognize the essential components of successful collaboration OER projects, including faculty expertise, student perspective, and OER principles. We want to evaluate the barriers faced by students in OER involvement, including creation, adaptation, and adoption. We want to develop strategies for gauging student readiness for OER projects and navigate the complexity and scope of collaborative OER initiatives. We have a brief outline of our work together today. But we're going to start with a little story and sharing that story. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce you to our librarian, DRC Hutchinson, and she is going to continue chatting with you.
Thank you, Rachel. So we want to sort of use an image to center your thoughts about this story before we get into it. Over the course of our experience that we're going to share with you, we discovered that OER development is like a 3-legged stool. The best work is produced when it includes the faculty expertise, student perspective, and the support of an OER librarian or another person with OER expertise. Not only do you need all 3 legs of the stool to be sturdy, the legs are also built concurrently to maintain that sturdiness throughout the project. And during this presentation, we'll tell you the story of the animal physiology project from each of our perspectives. And you'll see how our roles were intertwined, how those legs were built concurrently. Let's go ahead and jump into talking about the faculty journey. Though the faculty journey is Dr. Hanna's, it's Rachel's. My role as the OER librarian was to provide a foundational OER professional development, as well as answering ongoing questions and providing ongoing support throughout her journey. Dr. Hannah initially participated in an intensive multi-day workshop and participated in a structured community of practice before she undertook this work with OER creation. And in these programs that I developed and led, she learned what OER are, how to navigate Creative Commons licenses, how to find OER, and much more, the basics and beyond. These programs not only provided her with that professional development that she needed as a foundation, it also fostered a relationship between us, which helped her feel comfortable reaching out to me throughout the years since that initial training. And I was also available to her student Eddie to provide support and answer his questions throughout his journey.
So the challenge really is finding your network of people, right? I think that there's sometimes as faculty, we can have the fear of not being the expert when we get into this space. And the beauty of this development that DRC set me on with the training back in, I think, 2018, 2019, that it allowed me to have a network of support. And that was with the instructional designers, that was with DRC to help that. But also, it was with the faculty that were part of that cohort and knowing who all in my group on my university, at my campus and beyond, were interested in this work as developing resources that were more equitable for our students. And so this was really a pivotal moment for us to, for me to move into this space. In fact, the OER that Eddie and I ended up developing actually was a completely different, was from a completely different course than what I went to develop for this. So it really set me on the journey to do this work. And like anything, right? We are all stretched thin. We all are overcommitted most of the time, that it takes time and money to set aside that work to be done. So what I did was I actually sought out a curriculum grant to work on an OER for this, for my animal physiology class. And frankly, the first time I wrote the curriculum grant to support a student, I was denied. I didn't get the grant first time around because they thought it wasn't going to work with a student, and so I didn't have necessarily as much theoretical background in the write up as I could have. So that was really great in some ways, right? It kind of honed my ideas, honed my thinking, and then I resubmitted the following summer for a curriculum grant and received the funding for a student to help me. The other thing to think about, right, is that um, trying to break down the OER into manageable chunks sometimes is really challenging. And so having partners to help that. And what does that look like so that you can really go into the deep of working through building a textbook. And lastly, I want to uplift the idea of, is it good enough and safe enough to use? I think we have these struggles of being in a space where people are expecting perfection. And that's the beauty of OER. You can always be refining and always be making sure it's current and being in a space that is relevant for the people that you want to use it with. So I really, I think the time is really important to sometimes let things go to be good enough. But really, it came down to motivation, right? Of all the things that I can do and get to do with my faculty time and my students that I get to work with, the reality is that we are actually at the we have some campus-wide benefits and motivation to do this. Recently, in the last year, we have some Alaska state legislation mandating that we course mark our open access resources and our open education resources for zero cost textbook. And so making sure we're really kind of building a space that is equitable for all people, as we have a large population where in our student population that the students are in financial need. Also, thinking about increasing equity in the classroom. We all know, so some of those textbooks that are very myopic in their viewpoints. And so um, I get to create samples and ways by which that students can see Alaskan culture and potentially Alaskan examples of animal physiology. Also, by working with Eddie, the science education research. So we get to kind of think about, what does this really mean by using an open education resource? How do students using it? We can use clicking, like how many places on the textbook are people using, and what does that look like? And then analyze those data, as well as some of the theoretical background of using the textbook and learning resources. And lastly, for myself, right, this does fit into my promotion and tenure, and supporting that activity that I need to do as a faculty member. And I just really love supporting the students at a basic level. The animal physiology itself is a little bit over broad. And so I get to play in a lot of different spaces. And so having Eddie build a textbook with me really kind of allowed me to see different spaces and show in that show in that new area that's been a while for me since I've been an undergraduate. So with that, I want to introduce you now to Eddie Jew. He is our master's student with me in the Department of Biological Sciences.
Hello, everyone. I'll just go ahead and get started on the student path of like barriers to student involvement. So I actually met Dr. Hannah in my freshman year, and over the course of 3 semesters, I've had courses with her on and off. So I actually had good rapport with her. And like one of the first barriers that I was thinking of is like, do I know the professor? Because I know some professors can come off kind of scary and intimidating, even though they're nice and sweet on the inside. But being able to trust your professor and feel safe and not threatened, and be able to like regular communicate if you're ever having like a setback or if you just need time off, is going to be really important in this kind of project, just because there's going to be a lot of moving parts. And when it was just only me and Dr. Hanno, it would be very important to communicate, otherwise we would be off schedule. And then fully or sufficiently knowing the material. I actually took the animal physiology course and the lab associated with it, so I felt like I had a pretty good background knowledge on animal physiology. And of course, I also read all of the necessary reading and writing material associated with the course, just so I had everything in my head for when I really started to write on the OER project. And then understanding the amount of work and effort that will be necessary, because you kind of have to think about, this is going to be a very big project. The animal physiology spanned 5 whole chapters with a bunch of subheadings underneath it. So there was definitely days of just like crunching down on a keyboard and writing out paragraphs and paragraphs about homeostasis or the mind-gut axis. So do you even have the time over the semester or over the summer to be able to fully commit and plan out days that you're just going to spend writing, spell checking, or whatever else you need on the OER to continue forward with the project? And then evaluating student readiness. How do you know you truly are ready to be able to embark on this kind of big project with however many people that you're working with? In all confidence and honesty, you really don't. You kind of have to psych yourself into actually knowing that you're truly ready. Because if you plan out everything and think you're gonna be fine, or you're not really ready, it could very well be that you are ready and you're just psyching yourself out. And then can you confidently say you will ask for help when you're stuck? Going back to like, do you know your professor? really well enough to ask them, because life happens, events and delays happen. Even if you say your summer is going to be totally fine, and there's a 1 in a million chance that something's bad's going to happen. There's that saying, like 9 out of 10 times that 1 in a million will happen. So it's okay to, like, if you need to take a step back or if you're I had a trouble with the osmo regulation chapter in our OER, so I had to ask Dr. Hannah to help come in and like help me write it. And then how did you do when you took the course? Were you able to pass with flying colors? I would hope to think I did. Or did you take like a C and you need to brush up on some of the material? Because any student that's willing to help, you should honestly take, because they will have the motivation to keep on going. Don't always look towards the grade A students, because maybe, they have other plans and don't really want to do this. So if a C grade student comes up to you and asks, like, I'm really excited about wanting to write an OER textbook, maybe give them some of the reading material to help brush up on their theoretical knowledge so they are able to help with that. And then, are you confident with demonstrating the knowledge you have? I have this because reading and learning are very different from writing and teaching. So while you may have really good knowledge on like Z-disks or the mind gut access, because that's what you mainly focused in the lecture, in the textbook, you have to have like an all-around knowledge of homeostasis, osmoregulation, muscle contractions. So just making sure that you take the time to read everything. And also, what is your unique take on this knowledge? Because everyone learns differently. So maybe you have really good ideas for diagrams, and that'll help students further along the path, just because maybe the textbook didn't have any really good diagrams and you had to look on YouTube for that sort of thing. And finally, you want to do it, you're comfortable with the professor. Now, for the motivations for the work to be done, as Dr. Hannah said, it comes back to time and money. As an undergraduate student, if you didn't have like a lot of scholarships or funding, this could be one of the ways that helps put you forward. In my experience, it helped like cover the cost of a semester for college. So being able to work on this project was a really great boon, and not having me to like work elsewhere that's not associated with my degree was actually a great thing. And that kind of ties into research opportunities, because this also helped me get associated with Dr. Hannah's lab. And maybe if we didn't move on with the OER project, I would have gone on with her turtle bench work that she was also ongoing at the time. And then it's also kind of a resume builder, even if you don't go into like science education. When you're applying for master's or graduate schools, it could be really cool to say, I helped build an OER. And I had to actually have a lot of people tell me this, just because I've been working on it so long. I thought it was just normal and standard, but had a lot of people telling me, no, this was actually really great work and you should be more proud of it. And actually, I had a couple personal reasons to work on this project as well. Just because during my time with animal physiology, not to be mean, but Dr. Hannah had like a homemade, like she previously made like a list of all the links and materials that we needed over the course. And it was very mentally like overstimulating, just because when you see like a wall of text, you don't know really where to start. So trying to navigate that was really hard to do when you're trying to like write a paper and find the links that you need or get to the right thing, because she usually listed like 2 or 3 materials that you should read, but you don't know which one to start with.
So I just want to step in and sort of do a bit of a recap and a bigger picture here, talking about our lessons learned from each of our perspectives. So from the faculty perspective, Rachael called out how important it is to have partners throughout the process. And another big thing for her was overcoming the fear of sharing something that isn't quite done. And lastly, finding resources to support your additional work is essential. From the student perspective, Eddie Ju wants to call out that communication is vital to building an OER. And it's important to take your time with writing and editing. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And lastly, don't be afraid to innovate or give suggestions along the way. And from my perspective as the OER librarian, OER expert, make sure that your faculty have the foundation in order to take this kind of work on. Be available throughout to answer questions, and find external help and resources if needed. I can't do everything myself. I can't develop everything myself, but I can find these things and connect my faculty to them.
And so I want to just start to say that the story continues. It constantly is working together while we work together to make this presentation. Eddie is still working with me as a master's student now in this project, and DRC is on his committee. We are always looking to evolve and work together. And just like I said with the grant, I had to repeat that grant and to get funding. And yeah, Eddie, was really instrumental in telling me, like, Rachael, well, he never calls me Rachael, but Dr. Hannah, please, this wall of clicks and links that you made in this Google Doc, while it's amazing, is too much, right? And knowing that cognitive overload that I had tried to create from a non-textbook situation, what that actually meant for the students and what some of those activation barriers for them just to get to the material, that by creating the OER, Eddie has really helped me increase the summit and work and go forward with that. So to that end, I'll let Eddie talk about his master's journey.
So, sorry, after working on the OER, of course, and then being able to go around to a couple of conferences, I really fell in love with like the OER work itself and didn't really want to move on to like either turtles or mice brain anatomy. So like continuing on with the work with Dr. Hannah, she mentioned that maybe we can move this on to like master's research, and the OER textbook itself would be your chapter 1. So of course I had to like jump onto the train and keep on going because I couldn't really think of myself anywhere else other than the OER that I've spent like 2 whole years in my undergraduate. And like, the summit will always keep growing. It's the work is never done. I'm still updating the OER in bits and pieces here, not like when we had to write whole chapters in like a couple weeks or days, but just adding in like new pieces of information that come up whenever it gets discovered, or maybe a new chapter subheading just because I thought the image really fit in. And one of the coolest things about becoming a master's student is the networking I get to do at like all of these different conferences and events that I get to share my OER with. Getting to meet like a lot of people within STEM education is always a great plus, but also outside of STEM education, like getting to see all of these cool projects and ideas that people have come up with is really interesting to me and always gives me new ideas for the textbook as well. And one of the big things for me to continue as a master's student was trailblazing into like getting more students into these OER projects, just because I shouldn't be the only one that does this kind of work. I think it's a great idea and plan to do this kind of work just because it gives you such a big theoretical background in the subject that you write about yourself. And with that theoretical background, you should be able to go into like a research group and help them write out their papers and stuff. And another thing that is kind of a offside is like being able to create some of the work in the OER. Some of the fun is just being able to figure out what would best go into this kind of chapter. Like, for example, some people really had trouble with the sliding filament theory. So of course I had to like go in and find a couple of GIFs and videos from YouTube to able to help implement that during my undergraduate. So of course I threw that into the OER. And from my experience, a lot of people like to read all of the chapters necessary the day before. So I added in a couple brain breaks with like papers and helpful YouTube videos that I found that could give you time to help digest the larger bits of information. And when we gathered the information from the students, they actually really liked those brain breaks. So just being able to create and innovate is one of the best things that I could have done with my master's journey.
So hopefully, we've convinced you that the group of us have really come together to increase equity and fundamentally this OER to reduce student cognitive load. But this three-legged stool that we showed you in the beginning, we still see it as continuing in OER durability. And how do we move forward with this work? And we need constant support with each other because the way that different pieces of media are coming into play and what does that look like from the OER Commons licensing. I need DRC a lot to help go forward with that. You know, and Eddie and I have built a really strong support with each other, and he's applying for national funding for his work. So we continue to think about how do we grow and allow other people to increase the work together, even if it's smaller parts than just building the work together. And I'm curious, I'm actually thinking about trying to do this model within my neurophysiology class, but we'll see. So always thinking about what does that mean to increase equity in my classrooms, and frankly, reducing the student cognitive load to get to the materials when sometimes the concepts are a little bit more obtuse or convoluted to bring together. So they need more mental energy around that. So with that, we'd like to end our time of talking. If possible, we'd love to have your video on so we can see you, and we will have an active process, and we hope that we'll have some equitable sharing. We'll be monitoring the chat as well as we'd like to use Slido again to open up the questions that you folks might have that we might have stimulated, or that you have stories that you would like to share as well. So we would invite you to join us on Slido and or to go into chat itself. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. It is in the chat so that we can all see each other. And let me see. I'm working with all my screens here. And and now I'm going to share the Slido screen so that you folks can see that as well, if you so choose. So I'm going to start with some of the questions, and maybe Eddie and DRC can chime in if they so choose. How was I able to identify a student interested in participating? Well, you know, the beauty is we are in, so University of Alaska Anchorage is a predominantly undergraduate university. And since he was in both my classes for animal physiology, and he was really interested in doing lab work with me, but he had some constraints in timing to be in the lab. So I had written the grant for the curriculum, and I knew I had funding for that when I was talking to him, he basically said, yeah, I'll try that. And I knew that he was willing to put in the time and energy. And he was, even though he still calls me Dr. Hannah after all these years, he, you know, we have a pretty good rapport, I think. And so it was easy to have that conversation like, well, do you want to work with us? Right. And I also myself am willing to give people the shot. Right. And what does that take? And it worked out really well for both of us so far. So that's how I really kind of identified Eddie is part and parcel because of the classes. And so animal physiology, when he took it, was online and virtual and asynchronous. But the lab was in person, and that was about 20 or so people. So I got to see him that. How do I process check the students' work to make sure it's accurate? Well, I do want to uplift that we did this as a remix. So in animal physiology or in physiology, there's a lot of an A&P. And so it's just reading, you know, it's just reading and checking and having conversations about the chapters and what does that look like. So that, but I don't know, DRC, if you want to, I don't know of any specific frameworks for quality assurance with OERs.
There are like the checklists and things that can then help evaluate OER in general, whether they're ones that you create or most typically they're ones that you're reviewing, but certainly can be used as a checklist for thinking through your own work as you're developing. And I can pull a couple of those links and put it in chat.
Thanks, DRC. Have I seen an increase in student interest in OER and incorporating in a class? Actually, no. So last fall, Eddie put out a survey, and it was really interesting because people saw it as too much work, potentially. And so we actually his second chapter of his master's thesis is actually looking at potential gamification. And what does that look like as an OER resource? And what does that kind of engage in our class? So we are actually mandating it in the class this semester with Eddie's help to try to see if we can make more chunkable ways of engagement for OER. And also, I think there's some knowledge that we have to help people understand the level of OER engagement, right? And what that could look like. And so I think that's me learning how to incorporate that. Eddie, do you want to uplift any of the data that you saw with that survey last semester or last fall?
Like specifically to like the interest in OER research.
Yeah.
I think it was like an overwhelming 80% of students thought it would be too much of a drain on their available time, and the perceived difficulty of getting into OER was their like biggest reason why they would otherwise not want to join a OER. But we did have a couple that were interested despite like the feeling of the heavy weight that is OER creation.
Eddie, could you also uplift the question, how, as a student, could I get into OER? How would I approach a professor? What are your thoughts on that?
I would definitely see if you have an OER librarian as wonderful as DRC Hutchings. There is a zero textbook course club on our campus that I was affiliated with as well. So if they have a network of contacts for like professors that are interested or working with their zero cost textbooks, that would be a great way. I kind of lucked out with knowing Dr. Hannah for a while, and she was interested in this project. But if you see like any opportunities, if like a professor's mentioning that they worked on this themselves and need help with like optimizing it, you could always just go up and ask them during their office hours or free time, like at the end of class, And then otherwise, I would write a lovely email to them asking if they're interested in working in open educational resources or have any like volunteer options for like proofreading and checking their written materials. Because you will have like at least like one or two professors that are into this kind of project across the universities just from like speaking to people at conferences. There's always like one or two.
Rachel, we also have some questions here in chat. And I don't know if they're duplications, but so we do have the one about the assessment framework. I think we answered, and I was looking for the links. If you're planning to involve more students further in refining of the textbook, so they're wanting to know if you're planning on including students more.
Yeah, you know, the short answer is yes. So I am actually in the process of learning how to do Python and write in Python for my neurophysiology class, as well as that may be. And in that space, for some of those neuroscience computational work and the large data sets, I really am hoping to develop some sort of OER with that, but I'm still in that learning process for Python itself. So I'm kind of new to that space. And I think the biggest thing is having Eddie on our campus and having him in our department that, we have about 50 to 60 people in these upper division classes at any given time. So I can kind of bring him in and share with him. But also, like I said, we're trying to make more chunkable assignments, so to speak, for students to kind of get their feet wet and see that it's not as scary. And I'm many people who take animal physiology will then go around in the spring take neurophysiology. So I kind of get them in a 1-2 punch sometimes. So that's pretty good. So I'm trying, but it is challenging because many of our students are financially strapped. And so I really think that it's important that I pay a wage for the work that they're doing. And right now that's kind of sometimes challenging to get that funding. I usually have to do it via grants. I also see this, what additional supports are needed for faculty and students after participating in OER projects. I think that the community doesn't end. We're trying to build an Alaskan-based OER for intro bio, and trying to look at how we would incorporate more local ways of learning and knowing, and research and data from Alaskan-based spaces. And I think that having somebody to commit for that funding or that continued funding in some way that's not just a university short initiative, that you just kind of have to uplift that and keep that conversation going. It's not a one and done. It becomes part of how you engage in your curriculum, in my opinion. So with that, I know we have just a few moments left. I want to actually stop this share, and I'm going to go back to our slide so that everybody could see our lovely, well, of course, you always want to see some lovely moose from Alaska. This is actually right on our campus, right around the next building over from where I and Eddie are sitting right now. And then, but I do want to say thank you so much for your discussion, for your support, and for your questions. This is the QR code to our OER that Eddie has built and we've been working on. He's got some wonderful graphics, and his sense of humor comes out really nicely, that I think it does make it more personable for students to engage with. So with that, I really appreciate your time and energy with us today.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you.